Hello, and welcome to another episode on the Move.Talk.Thrive podcast. Well, as promised, today I am here to do a little podcast on, or open the conversation on the discussion and the distinction between regulation and behavior. I feel like they can be used quite interchangeably, but they're actually quite different. And when I actually sat down to think about how I would approach it today, I started to think about stimulation as well, because I often will refer to tapping into the sensory system to manage the stimulation, which can kind of land in the same area as regulation or behavior, but they're all very closely linked. So I thought this was a really good opportunity just to unpack it a little bit and understand how they impact each other. So that is what I'm going to talk about today. I am flying solo again. But Em should be back soon. I'm so excited to chat to her. I got a Voxer from her that still need to listen to. But as far as I know, she's doing really, really well, and Isaac is doing well. So we will continue to have updates there. But for now, let's get started on unpacking this distinction between regulation and behavior.
We are child development obsessed, business besties, and mums, and we're here to spill all our secrets.
We have a combined 30 years experience working with children, and each episode we will bring you up-to-date research and evidence-based strategies to set your children up to thrive.
I'm Lizzy Dawson, Australian exercise physiologist.
I'm Emily Mackey, Australian speech pathologist,
And this is the Move.Talk.Thrive podcast.
So I thought a really helpful place to start would be to actually look at what each of these things are. So first of all, we've got stimulation. So stimulation is basically information entering the nervous system. So, and that's obviously going to be via, well, not obviously maybe, but it's going to be via our senses. So every single second, a child's body is gathering data from the environment that they are in, sound, light, touch, movement, and then all of the things that they're feeling, their clothes, their smelling, their all of the environment, and all of the things that they're experiencing. And that can include instructions from parents or teachers, directions, changing of the environment, movement of the environment, all of those things. That's all stimulation. And the thing is that all children and all humans are going to experience that in a very different way. So we often talk about our sensory profile, and we're all going to have a sensory profile, and we're all going to sit somewhere on that profile. So each of our senses is going to experience the input in a unique way. So everyone is going to experience their environment around them a little bit differently. So you might have one child walking into a room or a shopping center and think, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. And then you might have another who walks into the exact same room and feels totally overwhelmed. So that is obviously quite common. Same room, same stimulation, same input, but a very different experience. And that's because the nervous system is doing the processing, and every nervous system is completely different. So that is stimulation. So now let's look at regulation. Once the stimulation comes in, what happens next? That is where regulation comes in. So regulation is how effectively the nervous system manages all of that incoming information. It's the ability to stay in a state that supports learning, attention, emotional control, and social connection even. And I want to be really, really clear about something here. Regulation does not necessarily mean calm. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we're in a calm state. A child can be highly regulated while they're running. jumping, laughing, and being completely full of energy. Regulation means they're in the right state for what's being asked of them in that moment, in that time of day. So when a child is well regulated, they can adapt, they can problem solve, they can recover from stress, they've got flexibility in how they react and respond to certain situations, and they're regulated. When that breaks down, when the nervous system is overwhelmed or understimulated, so we can go either way, their access to all of those higher level skills just completely fades away, completely drops away. So that is the regulation piece. So it's our ability to respond in a certain situation in a way that's, I guess, appropriate. Now, there's self-regulation, which I think is a really important, I guess, way to look at it. So self-regulation is the ability to manage our own arousal state, emotions, attention, and behavior in response to stimulation. So it develops gradually through childhood, and it will depend on co-regulation, neurological maturation, and sensory processing capacity. So it's really important to think about that self-regulation piece and the influences that take place. So the sensory processing, the neurological maturation, so the prefrontal cortex develops slowly through adolescence, and just really thinking of that prefrontal cortex and the way in which it develops. And then that co-regulation piece is massive, particularly when you're working with a group of kids. And then finally, we've got behavior. And so behavior is the observable output of what's happening internally. It's the result of how a child is processing stimulation and managing their regulation. So challenging behavior is often a signal of poor regulation, not intentional defiance. And I feel like I've been saying this a lot lately, so I won't kind of harp on about it. But the behavior is what we're observing. It's the outward expression of everything that's happening underneath the surface. So running around the room, refusing to participate, meltdowns, aggression, hiding, shouting, really loud behavior, shutting down. They're all behaviors. They're not random. They are the nervous system communicating. So the behaviors are a really good indicator of how a nervous system is responding to the stimulation, to the input that's going in. So a really good way to think about it is the behavior is what we see. Regulation is the state of the nervous system driving that behavior, and the stimulation is the information feeding the nervous system in the first place. So if we only focus on the behavior, we're reading the final chapter of the story and missing everything else that comes before it. So really important to look at these and look at the way that it flows. So it's the stimulation, like the environment that we're in, then the way that we process it, which then flows into regulation, and how we're regulating in that environment, and how our nervous system is responding, and then we've got the behavior, which is an outcome of the nervous system, which is an outcome of the environment and the stimulation that is going in. So I think that that is really like just a simple, super simple way of looking at it and explaining it. And I feel like once we kind of just, and I feel like this is kind of common sense, but it's just really nice to kind of just stop and reflect on it, because there's so much out there about behavior. There's so much out there about regulation. And there's a lot out there about sensory processing and you know how we're all, you know, overstimulated or understimulated. So I think it's just important to like pause, define those, look at those in their own right and how they're impacting each other. Now, how exercise physiologists in particular come into this, and I'm sure Em would have loads to say in terms of the communication, because I think communication is more of that. No, not necessarily. Anyway, that's Em's side. I'll what I might do is do an episode and she can kind of have her like 2 cents in some of these podcasts. If there's stuff that you want to know from the speechy side, it'd be awesome if you commented or yeah, just had an input into like just yeah, commented any questions or questions, queries, thoughts, and we can address those. But from an exercise and movement perspective, we can really influence these things. So, why does this all matter from movement and how can movement be important? It's because movement is one of the most powerful tools we have in changing that entire chain. So, movement changes stimulation. So, when we change the stimulation, we shift regulation, and when regulation shifts, behavior often follows. So naturally, without force, without battle, if we can manage the stimulation through movement, we can then start to have that impact on the nervous system, which then has an outcome on the behavior. So when you see a child who needs to run, jump, crash into things, maybe even like pushing, I know one of my boys loves to like when he gets really dysregulated, he loves to rip things. So it's like this pressure, this input that they're desiring. It might be like quite vocal and loud, which I experience in my house quite a bit as well. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're misbehaving. It means their nervous system is searching for that sensory input it needs to become more organized. The movement is not the problem. And in many cases, the movement is the solution their nervous system has already found. So I quite often talk to people when we look at it through the movement lens, we look at how they're moving to give us the information that we need. And then we can then design movement that is going to help regulate their nervous system. So, you often hear about you go into an early learning center, it's like, oh, the boys just need to move, they just need to be out and they need to move. But movement can be quite overstimulating as well. So if we're for a child with more complex sensory needs, just say that they've got a sensitive vestibular system or input where they're a bit hyper sensitive to vestibular input. If we're like changing positions and we're doing really disorganized movement like dancing and running all over the place, that can be quite overstimulating. That triggers flight and fright response in our nervous system. So it's watching their movement and starting to really understand what their movement is telling us, what they're needing, and what they're moving away from. And then it's about prescribing movement that is going to help regulate their needs and their nervous system needs in that time. So it's our job to understand that, work with it, and give children the right kind of movement at the right time. And that's quite often what we do as exercise physiologists. And that's definitely what we do at Kids Heart Pilates. So I think it's really about if you have got kids with behaviors, and when none of us are immune to this. I have two boys, and they both operate so differently because they've got different nervous systems. So it's really about respecting each individual child and their needs. And I think a really good place to start is to start with your own needs. Think about yourself and what you need in certain situations, and how you behave in situations. So in a busy restaurant, in a shopping center, at a party, like just start to think about how you respond in those situations, and maybe how you responded as a child and how it made you feel and what helped as well. And I think that just helps you kind of come to that level. And then I always say, and I've been saying the last few weeks, I think on the podcast as well, is just being really curious. Like, asking them how they're feeling. I have been having so many amazing conversations with my kids more recently, and I think it's just because I'm a bit more regulated. So that co-regulation piece is so important. So I feel like I'm a bit more regulated, and I'm just trying to, slow myself down and go, hey, what is it? What's going on? What are you needing right now? And they are getting so good at recognizing it in themselves and being able to communicate it. And one strategy that is really helpful as a parent, but also as a practitioner, is modeling what we're starting to learn for ourselves. So, really narrating how we're feeling. So, it might be, oh my gosh, it is so loud in here. It's making me feel really jittery, and I'm starting to feel angry, like I just want to yell. My son, when he is really dysregulated, he yells really loud. It's like he can't cry without yelling, and it's so dysregulating for me. Like, I really struggle to be there. And I've actually started saying to him, and this could be totally wrong, by the way, but I've started saying to him, I just, it's okay that you're upset. I can see you're really upset. I am here for you, but I can't. The yelling really makes me feel uncomfortable, and it's going to make me get angry. I just, I'm just going to go outside, and I'm going to be back. And I make sure he can see me. And then I go outside and I just try to calm myself, and I come back and I'm like, right. And I actually do a bit of a sensory when he's quite dysregulated or anxious. I'll do a sensory body scan. So I'm like, what can you see? What can you hear? What can you feel? What can you smell? What can you taste? And that seems to work well. But when he's really like going off the end, it can be quite hard. But what you can do in those instances is you can create that environment. So, for example, we were running a holiday program and I came in at 2 o'clock. All the kids get picked up at 3. I came in at 2 o'clock. The kids were running wild. It was winter last year. It was freezing cold, and they're all just running wild. I turned off the lights, turned on the heater to make it nice and warm, put some lavender in the diffuser, started talking really softly. I got down on the floor. I was moving really softly. I had relaxing music on, and I just started to like softly direct them to sitting down on the floor. And like within, probably took about 15 minutes, I had about 20 kids all down on the ground. So many of them started to wrap themselves up in their mat because they needed that like extra pressure, that extra input. I was like, isn't that interesting? Like that, they've got them kind of down by removing all of this extra stimulation. Then they like went an extra step to wrap themselves up. And it was those proprio boys that like run and crash, which one of mine is. And they needed that input. Um, and another thing you can do is you can go around and just put a bit of pressure through like on their legs, just pressing. And it was so remarkable just to see. And again, it's that co-regulation piece and the environment piece. And there's so much you can do with movement as well. So it's not, you have to understand what they're telling you from their body, and then prescribe movement that's going to be appropriate for the state they're in and the state that we want them to be in. And we need to be in the right state for learning, following instructions, focusing, all of those intricate skills that we're asking kids to do in therapy, mealtime, probably at home, school, all of these things. So I hope that has been super helpful for you. I feel like it has been like a nice little reminder for me just to go through like what each thing is and the flow of it, and remind myself what we do and how important it is, and how much we can shift things by implementing some simple strategies. So, as always, please share, rate, review the podcast, put out any questions, comment any questions, queries, any feedback. I'd love to hear it. And until next week, I'll see you then. Bye.